We are very pleased that so many of you are here today. We welcome you to the 7th Pasadena Business and Economic Summit. The Pasadena Chamber of Commerce is thriving. Isn't that good to know? Over the past 10 years, our membership has increased more than 50%. That and the energetic schedule of events and activities we present have been very good for our financial position, and we hope for good for our members.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of our great community. The fabric of our community is changing, especially when it comes to businesses. So it's important that each and every one of you reach out to your city council members, reach out to the mayor's office to advocate for things that are going to be best supporting of you as well. I'm a government contractor, so I understand how much red tape there is sometimes. And because I understand that, I think that we need to figure out policies and figure out ways to make sure that you can continue to be successful in our ever-changing environment and community.
Pasadena is a critically important part of the LA economy. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about where I see the economy going over the next 18 to 24 months. Albert Einstein said, "I never think of the future, it comes soon enough." But if you're an economist, you spend a great deal of your time thinking about the future and what we can do as local residents to keep our economy growing and thriving in the face of some pretty significant uncertainties that we look to see upon in the horizon. For the first time in several years, actually in several decades, we're starting to finally see some personal income growth at about 2.1%. And that's really a consequence of our growing GDP, growing economic growth, and declining unemployment rates. So that's really good. California alone contributes over 14% to the national GDP. The next two largest states, Texas and New York, together contribute about 17% together. So California is enormously important. And so what happens in California really kind of drives what's happening in the national economy. Most of the job growth is in-home healthcare workers. And in-home healthcare workers don't require a high school degree, and those jobs pay about $20,000 a year. The next highest job growth is in professional and business services, which is the orange line. And you can see the job growth. Again, professional and business services don't always necessarily mean high-paying office professional jobs. Most of these jobs are considered in administrative services and temp workers. Now, that's what's driving the job growth. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty if you're a temp worker. You don't know where your paycheck's coming week to week, month to month, and that affects how you're going to be spending in the local economy. Chances are, if you get your paycheck, you may not want to spend it locally. You might want to hold on to it because there's a lot of uncertainty. But as a consequence of the Great Recession, companies have really changed their hiring decisions now. And it's cheaper to hire a temp worker because of the uncertainty than hiring somebody full-time with all the benefits and then having to lay them off if you need to in the future. So this is kind of one of the consequences of the changes in our economy after the Great Recession. The types of jobs that we're adding have some concerns for us. Across all demographics, people are moving out of California, except for one demographic. And those are those who are earning more than $100,000 a year. So let's talk about wages. Again, we all know California is an expensive place to live. And if you see, the red regions are the ones that earn more than the national average. And as we would expect, Southern California, Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, these are high earners. But there's a significant portion of our state that is much lower wages than the national average, which is concerning because, again, California is a very expensive place to live. So we are finally seeing a little bit of personal income growth, but really our wage growth has been lagging behind what we would expect in times of economic prosperity with a lot of jobs and people wanting to hire quality workers. Why is our wage growth kind of lagging behind what we would expect? So the bottom line is the wage growth and the top line is the unemployment rate. So one of the reasons, declining unions, competition restraints if you move from one company to another. The minimum wage has been lagging, although now we are going to start seeing some minimum wage growth. Globalization has been an issue. Automation is a concern. Anemic productivity, outsourcing. And it's not just outsourcing in terms of out to another state or another country. There's a lot of outsourcing in the types of jobs. Historically, somebody could come in probably as a janitor in a large company and work their way up to a manager or director, vice president, etc. Now that job is being outsourced to a janitorial company. So one janitorial company is now servicing a lot of companies. And what happens with that is that if there's limited opportunity, upward mobility in a company. And that's really changed too. And that's also keeping wages down. So if you look at nominal wages, yes, your wages went up from 16,000 to 32,000, but really when you look at it adjusted for inflation, you've seen your wage growth only about $72 a year over the last 3 decades. So when you feel like your money's not going as far, when you feel like you're not earning as much, really this is because wages haven't really kept up with any inflation. And even when you do see some wage growth, it's really concentrated on the higher earners. So lower percentile of workers haven't really seen a lot of wage growth at all. And most of it's actually concentrated in the top percentile. Our inflation rate was about 3.1%. So remember I said that we're starting to see some personal income growth, about 2.5 to 2.8%. Now if you got a raise last year that was less than 3.1%, your earning power is actually less this year than it was the year before. Again, Los Angeles has 10.1 million people, a workforce of just about 5 million. And if we were a country, we would be the 19th largest country in the world. So we have significant economic power, and we have significant economic voice to really make some changes, and really what's gonna happen in Los Angeles drives what happens in the rest of the state, which in turn drives what happens in the rest of the country. Now, MIT has calculated a living wage for Los Angeles at just about $30,000 a year. That's what they consider an adult who's working full-time is going to be earning to support themselves. I think $30,000 is really low, but most of the jobs that are being added in our region actually pay even less than that. So only about 2 jobs, registered nurses and general operation managers, make almost 3 digits. So this is concerning for us because the types of jobs that we're adding really are going to drive our economic growth in the future. And so we need to be aware of it. So housing is a significant, critical issue, not just for Los Angeles, not just for Pasadena, really the rest of the state. One way to resolve housing issues is simply build more housing. So Los Angeles County is building a lot more housing. We're still not building enough units. We would probably need to build at least 100 to 200,000 units a year. I'll give you an example of why this matters for us. In 1960, the city of LA alone was zoned for 10 million housing units. That's just the population of LA County now. 50 years later, they only have about 4 million units. And a lot of it has to do with changing people's perceptions of housing. It's changing with NIMBYism. Rules and regulations have really impacted housing, and it's really pushing people out of the area. Median income earners in LA will have to spend probably about 50% of their take-home pay on rental housing. Median rent is $37,000 a year. California is actually on track to become a majority renter state by 2025. What that means is that there's a less ownership in your local community, less investment in your local community. Homeownership is a source of passing on wealth from one generation to another. So you can see there may some significant long-term consequences of moving into a majority renter state for us. This is a little bit of an older slide, but it shows that only 13,000 residents live and work in Pasadena. Pasadena sees a great influx of workers coming in from outside the city, and 42,000 Pasadena residents, on average, leave the city for work opportunities. So most of the industries that employ Pasadena, the top industries are professional scientific business services, healthcare and social assistance, retail trade, educational services. These are what we would consider population-serving industries. These are job opportunities for people helping support local residents. So I know we all have heard a lot about in the news about trade, the trade war, the trade crisis, tariffs. So I wanted to really quickly talk about what's happening with that. For every 1% increase in tariffs, there's a 6% commensurate decrease in imports. You know, we were always dealing with challenges in terms of imports and exports with manufacturing, consumer goods, industrial goods, but we have an opportunity to really expand our trade surplus in knowledge-based industries. So I know that our word has been on everybody's mind recently, recession, and what can we do to alleviate the impacts of a recession if and when it happens. Now, for an economist, the economy goes in cycles. There's up periods, down periods, and we expect that. However, this time, we are in the largest economic expansion in history. So where we would have anticipated certain slowing down, certain declines, we're not seeing that right now. Slow and steady is what's happening for us. So what are some signs that might lead to a recession that we might be seeing? A lot of it, recessions almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy. People start talking about a recession, they make anticipatory decisions, and that multiplies throughout the economy, causing the recession. Just so you know, if you're afraid of a recession, you're going to get one. Now, the thing that might affect us, and probably likely will affect us, and the thing that we have the least control over, is a major exogenous shock from outside our country. This includes war in the Middle East, a slowdown in China, which is already happening, and a fallout from Brexit in the United Kingdom. So because our markets and because our economy is so tied to the rest of the world, that whatever happens in the rest of the world will also affect us. So these are things we want to be aware of. Again, we're not seeing any signs of a recession now, but I just wanted you to know things that might affect us in the future. In conclusion, our economic growth is going to continue. We're continuing to add jobs locally. Unemployment is going to continue to fall. Personal income is going to be rising. All great news for us. However, things that might affect our economic growth moving forward: critical housing shortage locally, economic prosperity, again, not benefiting all of us. Extreme weather and climate changes are becoming more and more prevalent. And of course, political gridlock between the state and the federal government. So these are all things that might affect us in the future. Thank you so much.
Now, so what is 5G? There are 8 essential specifications for 5G. I'm going to speak to about 3 of them in some detail. But 5G will give you 99.99% reliability in your broadband connection and your voice connections. The end-to-end latency, which means the lag time between the time that you send a command to the network and the time that it reacts, is going to be 10 times lower than 4G. It's going to be around 5 milliseconds per second, milliseconds. The peak data rates, I already mentioned them, is 10 gigabits per second. The data volume, which is the amount of data that you can put through a wireless connection, is going to be 10 terabytes. That's 1,000 times what you can get through 4G. The mobility, which means how fast do the connections meet each other as you're going, is really important for things like automated vehicles or self-driving vehicles. So that's going to be 500 kilometers per hour. The density or the number of devices that you can have in a square kilometer is going to be really important too, and I'll explain that to you in a second. But that's going to be 1 million devices in a square kilometer. And then there's energy efficiency and flexibility to deployment. So let me talk about the data volume, because that's really important. When you get the speeds together, along with the data volumes, then you can put in a ton of information, and you can have the seamless remote surgery, you can have seamless self-driving cars, and many other use cases that we're going to talk about in a bit. Again, 10 terabytes per square kilometer per second, and the density is 1 million devices per square mile. So let's think about that for a second. I'm going to pause on that. If you've ever been to a concert at the Rose Bowl, or if you've ever been to the Rose Bowl, and you have 90,000 people there trying to use their devices at the same time, what do you get when you're trying to upload a video or see anything from broadband? You get what I call the buffering circle of death. How many people have seen that? The buffering circle of death, where you just can't get anything. All right. Well, part of the reason you have that is because you have so many devices at the same place with very little data throughput for your 4G device at very slow speeds at 16 megabytes per second or less, because you have all the people using the network. With 5G, you're going to be able to have all those people doing all kinds of stuff, downloading high definition 2-hour movies within 4 seconds, and it's not going to impact the network at all. You're not going to get the buffering circle of death. Again, the latency, which is the lag time, is going to be reduced in a way that's really, really important. So when you put together the 10 gigabytes per second speed, along with the data throughput of all this data, and you put the latency, the very little lag, then that's when it becomes a game changer. It becomes revolutionary. We call it the fourth industrial revolution. And Qualcomm's president and CEO called this the same impacts that electricity had when electricity was first made commercially available. It's big.
Thank you for having me. The Pasadena Center Operating Company. Give you a little bit about our company. We were founded in 1973, incorporated, I should say, as a 501c4, which means we're not a charity. And the idea was, at the time, how we attract tourists. And this is really what we're here today to talk about. Is we have a marketing and communications department. They're virtually all over here to the right. And what we do is we host a lot of media. And by having media come in, we get articles. We've had 30 articles last year throughout the country. You can see some of the list there where we're promoting Pasadena. We had 120 million brand impressions, meaning there were 120 million people had the opportunity to take a look at all of the publications and media that we've been in. Tourism trends, what do we look at? This is what people are wanting to do nowadays. Culinary. Culinary is big. Culinary doesn't mean restaurants. Culinary means they want a unique experience. Micro trips, small trips, trips that are quick weekends away. Leisure means traveling with when you're on business. You want to go to a place where you actually enjoy visiting. And then the generations to watch, and there's 3 of them: millennials, Gen Z, and active seniors. Micro trips. Again, 72% of millennials took at least one microcation, meaning that they're going to small trips to unique destinations. And sometimes it's not about a whole city, it's about going to a particular neighborhood in a city. The one thing to note about millennials, and we have, we've been working and promoting to millennials for some time now, that millennial families are growing, and that's a big thing. Obviously, they're adventure seekers, they're tech savvy, and they seek new culture and exotic locations. Here's the big stat, and even when I went through the presentation, I said to the staff, I said, is this true? And they said, absolutely, that by 2020, it'll be the largest population globally. And they're entering the workforce, obviously. Booking.com research shows that 69% have already compiled a list of places that they want to attend. They're digital pioneers. We know that, right? We just talked about internet, phone, voice technology, speed. They want everything is through the phone, everything is through an app, everything is through a computer. And they embrace the shared economy. So whether it be Airbnb or whether it be Uber or Lyft. China, we've always had a China Ready program, and we've worked with the Los Angeles Tourism Bureau on this, the state of California. Obviously, China travel into Pasadena, China travel within LA is a big deal. And everybody still wants a piece of the Chinese visitor. But it's now about the independent traveler. The tours that came in years ago, tour on top of tour, they're still out there, but they're not nearly as big because people are coming back a second time. Chinese women are the dominant independent travel force at 58%, which now when you take a look at it, they also spend 14% more. Now, why is that? Let's look at what China means to the Pasadena economy. There's $26.3 million spent in Pasadena. Majority of it's on healthcare, right? So maybe that it could be surgery, plastic surgery, having babies, whatever it might be. But that's a really big number, 14 million. Healthcare, retail, lodging, and entertainment. You can take a look at that. Continue to build on Pasadena's strengths. And this is no secret to any of us, but art, culture, architecture, science, Caltech, and JPL, that's where the majority of our business come from. Obviously, the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl Stadium. Those are big, big drivers of people to notice Pasadena. The Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl game don't get enough credit for showing, in my opinion, don't get enough credit for showing the world Pasadena. There's no way that we could ever buy that kind of publicity on New Year's Day around the parade. And it gets lost, right? It gets lost into it, but everybody, everywhere I go says, oh, did you get to go to the Rose Bowl game? And again, they know Pasadena for a lot of other things, but let's face it, they've seen Pasadena because of it. So that's all I have, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Take a look at the headlines that came through over the last 60 days, and it will give you kind of a feeling for what's going on nationally right now. The occupancy in Pasadena has exceeded Glendale and downtown LA. There is an article, and I will give you the stats on that, that indicates that it was the busiest office investment period in Pasadena's history last year. There was amazing transactional value accomplished. New York City investment sales are on pace to hit a 9-year low, and that has everything to do with housing and the fact that they are trying to do what everyone is trying to do around the country, and that's make sure that there's more affordable housing, and that has a tendency to slow development. Then if we can't, I couldn't not comment on what's happening in downtown LA. This was just one article about a local investor buying a 26,000 square foot piece of retail in South LA. And it's happening. I'm sure you've all been down there to see what's happening. It's amazing, and it's a positive, wonderful thing. 888 West Walnut, that was a building built about 15 years ago by IDS, and it was built primarily for eHarmony. That was eHarmony's original headquarters. It was fully leased when it sold in 2015, and when it sold at $350 a square foot, we all thought, woohoo, we've hit the jackpot. Well, it just sold again. It sold for about $100 a square foot more, and it was 50% vacant. But it was purchased by an owner user. ACO Engineering bought it for their own use. So again, just strong dollars being paid for commercial office buildings in Pasadena. This is a very positive statement about what's happening. This is sales taxes in Pasadena. So you can see, if you look at the highlighted columns, that the 2018 revenues in the various central district areas are way up. Old Pasadena up 25%, the Playhouse District up almost 9%, South Lake up 3%, but it's all good news in that people are spending money, and we're the beneficiaries of it from the sales tax standpoint. And then just quickly a wrap on what's happening in the area. In the Playhouse District, the first new urban park in downtown LA. Plans are underway. That's a partnership between the Playhouse District and the city, and they're going to bring a nice new public park there. There's new restaurants opening, new fitness. The Healthy Spot is a dog spa and place to buy dog supplies that's coming there in the old Sitar restaurant. Compass Realty, which has expanded hugely, just completed occupancy in the Playhouse Plaza building, and that building is now full.
I want to thank all four of you for joining us today. I don't know if it's because I'm chairing this or not, but this was probably the most informative one that we've had. They were fantastic. Each and every one of you gave us information, and I think that as people in the business community, we could use this information, and I don't think there was a second here that was wasted. Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming.